My name is Jenna Lee. I'm 31 years old, and for most of my life, I believed my parents were good people. Not perfect, no one is, but the kind who tried, the kind who showed up to parent-teacher conferences, remembered my birthday, took me to dance classes, and told me I was smart and special. That's what makes this story hard to tell. Because when the people who raised you are also the ones who betrayed you, it does something to the way you see the world. The betrayal didn't happen all at once. It unfolded slowly, quietly, like a house with a cracked foundation that nobody notices until one day the entire floor caves in. The day everything changed was a warm Saturday in May. I remember because the sun was out, the breeze was perfect, and I had no reason to think my life was about to split in two. My Uncle Greg had called me earlier that week asking for help cleaning out his attic. He was selling the house he'd lived in for 30 years to move closer to his grandkids. I adored Uncle Greg. He was my dad's younger brother, softer, quieter, kinder. He wasn't around much growing up, but he never forgot a birthday and always sent handwritten cards. I hadn't seen him in a couple of years, so I said yes without hesitation. He greeted me at the door with 2 mugs of coffee and that crooked smile of his. "Ready to get dusty?" he asked. I laughed. Born ready. We spent the morning in the attic, sorting through dusty Christmas decorations, old tax returns, and boxes full of high school yearbooks from people I didn't know. Then came the box labeled Mom's Docs. His mom, my grandmother. I remembered her in pieces: lavender perfume, thin fingers, a quiet voice. She died when I was 12. I remember the funeral mostly because of how tightly my mom gripped my hand and how my dad didn't cry. Uncle Greg handed me the box while he checked another stack. "You want to take a look through this one?" he asked. Most of it's legal stuff, old letters, some keepsakes, I think. I opened the lid and began sifting. Halfway through the pile, I found a folder. Yellowed slightly with age, with a bright pink post-it stuck to the front. For Jenna, open when she turns 18. My breath caught. "Hey, Greg," I called. "Did Grandma ever leave me something?" He looked over his shoulder. "Yeah, I thought your parents gave it to you." He trailed off when he saw my face. "I never got anything," I said. My voice sounded small even to me. I opened the folder slowly, like it might break if I wasn't careful. Inside were several typed pages. The first was her will. It listed my father and Uncle Greg as her sons and named me, specifically Jenna Lee, granddaughter, as the sole beneficiary of a trust fund. To Jenna, I leave the sum of $250,000 to be held in trust until her 18th birthday for use in education, housing, or business endeavors. This is for her future and should not be touched by anyone else under any circumstances. $250,000. I blinked. Read it again. It was dated the year before she passed. I flipped through the rest. Bank documents, transfer papers, trust account info. There were signatures from my father as the executor. My father. My hands began to shake. "Greg," I said slowly, "do you know what happened to this?" His expression shifted. "What do you mean?" "I never got it. I went to college on loans. Took a decade to pay them off. I've never seen a cent of this." Uncle Greg's eyes darkened. He took the folder from my hands and thumbed through the documents. When he got to the final page, he stopped. "This account was closed 7 years ago," he muttered. "The funds were liquidated." I felt like I was floating above my own body. What does that mean? He looked up at me. "It means someone took the money." That night, I drove home in a fog. I didn't cry. Not yet. My mind wouldn't let me. It just kept playing moments on a loop, My parents saying, "We can't afford that," when I got into NYU, me working 2 jobs through school. My dad's sudden renovation of the house around that same time. My mom's designer handbag collection that seemed to grow overnight. It had been there all along, I just hadn't seen it. They took it. They took my inheritance, my future, and they never said a word. They watched me struggle, heard me cry over debt, let me live in a shoebox apartment while working 80-hour weeks just to survive. And they said nothing. I confronted them the next day. I didn't warn them I was coming. I drove straight to their house, my childhood home, a charming 2-story colonial with fresh paint and flower beds out front. My mother opened the door, surprised. "Myra," she said brightly, "what a surprise." I didn't smile. "We need to talk." She faltered but let me in. Dad was in the living room watching golf. When he saw me, he sat up. "Everything okay?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "It's not." I dropped the folder on the coffee table. "I found this at Uncle Greg's." They both went still. Mom reached for it, flipping through like it was a magazine. Dad's face tightened with each page. "You were supposed to give this to me when I turned 18. Silence. "I was struggling," I continued. "I was drowning in loans, and you let me." My father cleared his throat. "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is," I snapped. "It's my name, my money." "We raised you," Mom said sharply. "Do you think that was free? Do you think we didn't deserve help?" I stared at her. "You didn't ask me. You stole it." "We used it for you," Dad lied. "The house, food, tuition." "I paid my own tuition," I shouted. "With loans. I still have the paperwork." My mother's voice turned cold. "You're being dramatic. We made choices for the good of the family." "You made choices for yourselves," I said, "and you lied." She stood, chin high. "You have a good job now, a nice apartment, you're fine. Why are you digging up the past?" "Because I'm not fine," I said quietly, "and I don't forgive you." I turned and walked out. They didn't follow me. That was the last time I spoke to them in person. But it wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. I didn't storm out of my parents' house with threats or dramatic speeches. I didn't tell them I would ruin them or demand the money back. I didn't even cry until I was 3 blocks away, stopped at a red light, hands clenched around the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. What I felt in that moment wasn't rage, it was something colder, something heavier. The kind of clarity that settles in when you finally understand that the people you trusted most were never on your side. That clarity followed me home, followed me into my shower where I stood under scalding water until my skin was red, followed me into bed where I lay awake, staring at the ceiling until the sky began to lighten. By morning, the shock had worn off. What remained was resolve. I replayed every conversation from the night before, every dismissive tone, every rationalization. "We raised you. You're fine now." Why dig up the past? They hadn't apologized. They hadn't even looked ashamed. They acted like they were entitled to my future simply because they had given birth to me. That realization hurt more than the theft itself. The money was tangible, measurable. Their lack of remorse was something else entirely. It told me that if they could do this once and sleep at night, they would do it again, maybe not to me, but to anyone they could justify exploiting. I took the day off work. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, a legal pad, and a cup of coffee that went cold untouched. I wasn't plotting yet. I was inventorying. I needed to understand exactly who my parents were now, not who I wanted them to be. Over the years, I'd heard bits and pieces about their finances, casual comments, complaints disguised as jokes. My dad had retired early, earlier than most people his age. My mom hadn't worked in decades. They traveled more than they used to. Cruises. Weekend getaways. Renovations that always seemed to coincide with moments when I was struggling the most. At the time, I'd assumed they'd saved well. I knew better now. I started with public records. It didn't feel like revenge yet. It felt like research. I searched property records and found the house was still mortgaged, refinanced twice in the last 10 years. The second refinance lined up almost perfectly with the year the trust had been liquidated. I pulled my credit report next, half expecting to find something else ugly hidden there, but it was clean. I had been careful, responsible. The irony wasn't lost on me. Then I searched business registrations. That's when I found it. My parents had recently registered an LLC under a name I barely recognized. A home decor and lifestyle boutique in a small but rapidly gentrifying town an hour away. It explained a lot. The new furniture. The sudden, busy weekends. The way my mom talked about the shop like it was a passion project that had always existed, even though she'd never mentioned it before. I leaned back in my chair and let out a slow breath. They hadn't just spent my inheritance. They had built their second life on it. That night, I didn't sleep much, but my thoughts were no longer frantic. They were orderly. One thing about working in finance, about spending years analyzing risk, behavior, and systems, is that you learn how fragile most success really is. People like my parents didn't thrive because they were smart. They thrived because no one ever challenged them. They had floated from one safety net to another, convinced they deserved every soft landing. And now, they were standing on something far more precarious than they realized. I made myself a rule early on: no confrontation, no exposure, no scenes. I didn't want them to know it was me. I didn't want them to have the satisfaction of playing the victims or rewriting the narrative. I wanted consequences, not drama. I wanted the kind of loss that felt inexplicable from the inside, the kind that made you look back and wonder where everything went wrong. The next week, I drove to the town where their shop was located. I didn't go in. I parked across the street and watched. It was charming, I'll give them that. White brick exterior, tasteful signage, big windows filled with neutral-toned pillows and ceramics. It was exactly the kind of place people with disposable income wandered into on weekends. My mother was behind the counter, chatting animatedly with a customer. My father stood near the register, looking proud. For a moment, I felt something twist in my chest. Not regret. Something closer to grief. This was the life they'd chosen. This was what they'd taken from me to build. I didn't walk inside. I didn't want to be recognized. Instead, I took photos. Not of them, but of the shop, the foot traffic, the neighboring businesses. I noted what kind of stores surrounded them, which ones were busy, which ones looked like they were barely holding on. I noticed the boutique across the street, selling similar items at slightly lower prices. Competition already existed. That was important. Over the next few weeks, I visited again. Different days, different times. I watched patterns form. Slow mornings, busy afternoons, weekends that looked promising but not overwhelming. This wasn't a gold mine. It was a balancing act. And balance is easy to disrupt if you know where to push. At home, I built spreadsheets. I estimated their overhead based on comparable businesses: rent, utilities, inventory costs, staffing. I ran scenarios. What would happen if foot traffic dropped by 15%? What if supply costs increased? What if reviews dipped just enough to make new customers hesitate? None of these things would destroy a well-run business. But this wasn't a well-run business. This was a passion project funded by stolen money and held together by optimism. I thought about my grandmother a lot during that time. about the way she used to tell me stories about women who survived hard lives by being patient, observant, and quiet. She believed noise was overrated. "The strongest people don't shout," she once told me. "They wait." I wondered what she would think of what I was doing. I decided she would understand. She had left me that money for a reason. She had seen something in me that my parents never bothered to look for. The first step of my plan didn't involve them at all. It involved me. I tightened my own finances, moved money around, created buffers. I didn't want anything traceable. I didn't want to need them for anything, ever. Independence was part of the revenge. Then I reached out to a friend from college who worked in digital marketing. I didn't mention my parents. I didn't mention revenge. I told her I was thinking about investing in retail and wanted to understand how local boutiques attracted customers. She walked me through ad targeting, search optimization, review ecosystems. She had no idea she was handing me a blueprint. By the time I went back to their town a month later, I wasn't just observing anymore. I was ready. I stood across the street again, watching my mother rearrange a display in the window, my father carrying boxes from the back. They looked happy, secure, untouchable. They had no idea that everything they were standing on had already begun to shift. And the most satisfying part was this: I didn't feel guilty, not even a little. I felt calm, focused, certain. They had taken my future without asking. Now, I was simply taking my power back quietly, carefully, and on my own terms. Every downfall starts somewhere. One small shift, one loose thread pulled gently enough to go unnoticed, but precisely enough that the unraveling becomes inevitable. That's where I began. The boutique had been open for a little over a year, according to business filings. It was pretty, aesthetic. Every detail clearly curated for the Instagram generation: soft lighting, muted tones, reclaimed wood tables, minimalist signage. My mother's name was on the lease. My father had signed as guarantor. They had poured everything into it, not just money, but pride. I could tell by how my mom posted about it online. Living the dream after all these years. Our little oasis. The captions made me sick. Especially when I imagined the caption that could have been mine if they hadn't stolen from me. First-generation business owner. Debt-free. Thanks, Grandma. But I wasn't here to wallow. I was here to pull threads. I started with their reviews. They had about 35 Google reviews, all glowing. Too glowing. It didn't take long to spot the pattern: friends, other shop owners, probably acquaintances from their church. That gave me an idea. I created a fresh Google account and started posting subtle, believable critiques, not one-star attacks, but the kind of 3-star reviews that actually make an impact. Beautiful shop, but overpriced for the quality. Friendly staff, but slow service and limited stock. Cute place, though some items looked dusty. I spaced them out. Different names, different accounts, different phrasing, one at a time. I did the same on Yelp. Then I moved to their competitors. There were 2 nearby stores that sold similar products: handmade soaps, candles, throw pillows, rustic mugs, and locally sourced trinkets that no one truly needed but everyone on Pinterest wanted. I began leaving 5-star reviews for those places again, subtle and specific. Loved the customer service. Better prices than the shop across the street. They actually gift wrap without charging. I wasn't sabotaging blindly. I was redirecting. Nudging foot traffic without anyone noticing the pressure. Still, reviews alone wouldn't sink a shop. Not fast. I needed something more systemic. I revisited the boutique's website. It was fine. Clean, basic, clearly made from a drag-and-drop builder. But it lacked SEO optimization. No meta tags. No keywords and product descriptions, no Google business integrations. That was my in. Using a VPN and an alias, I purchased a domain name almost identical to theirs, just a single letter off. I built a duplicate website using AI and template tools, same font, similar design, but with cleaner product descriptions, faster load times, and a working online store. Then I ran ads. I created a few dummy social accounts and ran targeted ads for my version of the site, tagging the right hashtags, geofencing to their town. The goal wasn't to steal business, it was to create confusion, to make their customers wonder, wait, which one is real? I got messages within days from curious shoppers thinking I was them and asking if they could pick up items in store. I politely redirected them to my own inventory, which I sourced dropshipped from Etsy creators and small wholesalers. I didn't even care if I made a profit. I just wanted to see what would happen if their customer base started to feel uncertain. And it worked. On their Facebook page, someone commented, "Hey, are you the same as Hearth and Honey? I saw your candles on another site." My mom replied, confused, "No, we are Hearth and Home." The reply below? Weird. The other one looks exactly like your stuff. The cracks had begun to form. But reviews and websites were still surface level. I needed something deeper, something operational. The next thread I pulled was their inventory. I called one of their main suppliers, an artisan pottery studio in Asheville I recognized from their Instagram. Posing as a boutique owner from a nearby town, complete with a new email, logo, and dummy website, I asked for wholesale options. The owner, cheerful and unsuspecting, shared her catalog with pricing. I replied that I was opening soon and had noticed one of her resellers in the area. "Do you usually do exclusivity by zip code?" I asked casually. She said no, but thanked me for bringing it up. 3 weeks later, my parents' boutique posted that they were phasing out certain pottery items due to supply issues. That was the first domino. In small shops like theirs, everything is connected. Lose a vendor, and suddenly your shelves look sparse. Sparse shelves mean fewer photos for social media. Less content means slower engagement. Slower engagement means lower visibility. Lower visibility means fewer walk-ins. And still, I never touched a single cent of theirs. I never threatened, never hacked, never lied. All I did was nudge. One of the more satisfying moments came a month later when I overheard 2 women talking outside the store on a busy Saturday. "Didn't they used to have those handmade cups?" "Yeah, but now they just sell generic stuff." "I kinda like the other place better. Feels more personal." They didn't know I was the one who shifted their preference. I didn't need them to. Meanwhile, I set up Google alerts for their shop name, my parents' names, and variations of the business title. I followed their tax ID through public records and saw when they filed a renewal for the LLC. They were still trying, still believing they could hold it together. Good. I wanted them to try. I wanted them to keep trying just long enough for the effort to wear them down. Let the failure be slow, subtle. Let it feel like the world just stopped caring about them. Let them never suspect the daughter they stole from was the one planting every seed of their collapse. At night, I'd sit in my apartment, sipping wine, scrolling through their latest posts. I watched as their captions shifted from hopeful to defensive. Supporting small businesses matters now more than ever. We're still here and grateful for every order. If you love us, leave a review. It helps more than you know. It was happening. The desperation phase. The tipping point. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. By the time autumn arrived, the air felt sharper, and so did I. Their boutique Hearth and Home was showing early signs of wear. Subtle, yes, but visible to someone who knew what to look for. Shelves weren't stocked as neatly. Their Instagram page, once filled with overexposed flat lays and chipper hashtags, now recycled old photos more often than not. Captions leaned desperate. Engagement was down. The monthly market events they'd once co-hosted with other businesses stopped appearing altogether. But it wasn't enough yet. They were still standing, still smiling through the cracks, still holding on to a dream they built with stolen bricks. And I hadn't come this far just to watch them stumble. I wanted to see them fall. So I started pushing harder. First, social media manipulation. I knew enough from my digital marketing friend to understand how visibility worked. Geo-targeting, algorithm triggers, engagement bait. I created a new Instagram profile under the persona of a local lifestyle reviewer. I filled it with cozy content latte art, soft lighting, bookstore selfies, and started following local shops in their town, interacting with their posts, slowly building credibility. I followed Hearth and Home too, left casual but underwhelming comments like, cute, pricey though, or feels a little outdated lately. Things that wouldn't raise alarms, but would plant quiet doubt in other visitors. Meanwhile, I boosted competitors, especially the smaller one, across the street that they'd ignored. I reached out anonymously to that store's owner offering to help with SEO and digital branding as a fan of small women-owned businesses. I even bought a few items from Action. Her shop sent as gifts to friends out of state just to help with her online traction. It wasn't sabotage. It was redirection. But not all of my tactics stayed that soft. I had been keeping tabs on their business license renewals. Their signage permit was due for renewal in October. Most small businesses set those to auto-renew or don't think twice about the fine print. I did. Using a burner email, I sent a polite but firm message to the town's zoning board, framed as a concerned citizen. Hi. I've noticed a number of signage violations downtown, especially by boutiques blocking sidewalk accessibility or violating brightness restrictions. Is there an enforcement schedule for the upcoming quarter? I didn't name Hearth and Home. I didn't need to. Their sign used Edison bulbs too bright by local code. Their sidewalk display tables technically exceeded allowable obstruction space. 2 weeks later, they received a formal warning and a fine. Their Instagram post read, "Frustrated and confused by our town's recent code enforcement, small businesses deserve better support." The comments lit up with divided responses. Some rallied behind them. Others, small-town gossips and petty rivals, left passive-aggressive replies about how rules exist for a reason. The next escalation came through community events. Their shop had once been a regular vendor at the monthly downtown art market, but the events were organized by a rotating committee of shop owners. Using yet another persona this time, posing as a young artisan trying to break into the market, I emailed the event coordinator with concerns. I sent screenshots of a few recent poor reviews, referencing customer service issues. I included a vague, fabricated complaint about how the owner of Hearth and Home, my mom, had been dismissive and rude during a shopping experience. "I just want to feel safe and supported as a new seller," I wrote. Their energy felt exclusive. Was it a low blow? Yes. But again, no lies, just suggestions, just seeds. That same month, their name disappeared from the vendor lineup. They claimed schedule conflicts in a post. But I knew better. Still, I needed to hit something deeper, something financial. So I turned to returns and refunds. I made multiple purchases from their online store under different names and addresses. Candles, a hand-woven throw, a few ceramic bowls, After a week, I emailed asking for a return on one item, claiming it arrived chipped. I sent a photo carefully edited to show a subtle crack. They refunded me. I did it again under a new name. This time, the excuse was that the scent gave me headaches. Another refund. It wasn't enough to bankrupt them, obviously. But I wasn't trying to destroy the business in one move. I was trying to bleed it out slowly, quietly, until they could no longer tell the difference between regular hardship and sabotage. Meanwhile, I began monitoring local gossip threads and forums, small-town Facebook groups, Nextdoor, anywhere people whispered about businesses. I planted a few conversation starters. Has anyone else noticed a weird vibe at Hearth and Home lately? I used to love that place, but last time I went, it felt off. Just me? Heard they're going through some stuff. Hope everything's okay. These were the digital equivalents of raising an eyebrow. And they worked. A month later, someone posted, "I heard they're thinking of closing. Anyone know the tea?" My mother responded in the thread, "Absolutely not. We are thriving and grateful. Please don't spread baseless rumors." That comment had over 30 replies. But not all of them were kind. People had started circling, and they didn't even know why. Still, part of me wondered if I'd gone too far. I hadn't meant to humiliate them publicly, just erode them, quietly, remorselessly. But then I found something that made every hesitation vanish. A blog post. On their own website, titled, "Why We Started Hearth and Home." It was a full page of self-congratulatory narrative, how they'd built something from scratch in their later years, how no one handed us anything, how they'd pushed through adversity and made their dream real without help. No mention of me, no mention of the $250,000 they drained to fund it. No recognition of the daughter they abandoned to debt so they could play entrepreneurs in retirement. I stared at that page for a long time. Then I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and got back to work. Because the next phase wasn't just about pressure. It was about collapse. The beautiful thing about a well-constructed illusion is how fragile it becomes when even one pillar is removed. My parents had built their entire boutique on 3: perception, suppliers, and stability. I had already chipped away at the first 2. Now, it was time to go for the third. And I knew just where to start. Over the weeks I'd been tracking them, I compiled a list of all the vendors they used, sources I pulled from Instagram tags, packaging labels in unboxing videos, and old blog posts my mom had written before she started recycling content. There were 11 key suppliers. Of those, 5 were small batch artisans. 3 were wholesale vendors, 2 were import brokers, and 1 was a local craftsman who made their custom wood signs and centerpiece displays. He would be the first to go. His name was Marty. I recognized his work. It was stamped on the back of every "Gather" or "Welcome Home" rustic sign in their store. He was talented, and according to my research, he ran a one-man operation from his workshop 2 towns over. I drove out there one Friday, pretending to be a customer looking for a custom design for a fake business. His shop was small, cozy. He greeted me with a thick New England accent and a warm handshake. "I love your work," I told him. "I actually found you through Hearth and Home." His face lit up. "Oh yeah, they're great folks. Been working with them for over a year now." I smiled. "They mentioned something about phasing out your signs?" He frowned. "Really? They didn't say anything to me." "Maybe I misunderstood," I said casually, "but they're shifting toward modern prints now. Something about moving away from the country rustic aesthetic?" His frown deepened. "Huh, that's news to me. They just reordered last month." "I mean," I added, sipping my coffee. They said it in a tone that made it sound like your work just doesn't sell as well anymore. Silence. Then I asked the real question. Do they have exclusivity with you? Or can other boutiques in the area carry your work? By the time I left, he was already mentally drafting contracts for other stores. 2 weeks later, I saw his signature signs in a competitor's window. And not just any competitor, the one across the street. My parents noticed. They posted a passive-aggressive Instagram story. Love it when exclusive vendors suddenly become community wholesalers. Support original shops, not copycats. No one cared. In fact, several replies supported the other store. But that was just the appetizer. The main course was the import vendor. I'd traced several of their popular textiles, Turkish towels, Moroccan pillow covers to a mid-sized import house based out of New Jersey. I called them under the identity of a new boutique looking to launch online only, explained I'd seen their goods in Hearth and Home, and asked if they allowed exclusivity. The sales rep paused. We don't usually do exclusives, but if one of our clients requests it, I pounced. I just want to make sure I'm not working with someone who's unstable. A friend of mine had a weird return experience at their store. The owner got defensive and blamed her for a torn pillow cover. The rep chuckled, slightly uncomfortable. Well, that's unfortunate. I haven't heard that, but I'll make a note of it. Within 2 weeks, that same vendor stopped tagging Hearth and Home in their promotional posts. 2 months later, I'd find out from a quiet connection that they politely declined to restock with them due to ongoing inventory disputes. The disruption didn't come with a bang. It came like a cold wind, slow, quiet, constant. I kept applying pressure through micro-actions, coordinated product returns, strategic 3-star reviews, and perhaps most powerfully, I started quietly advertising a seasonal pop-up shop using almost identical branding and aesthetic to theirs on Facebook, Instagram, even Etsy, just enough to siphon attention. It wasn't real. The pop-up didn't exist. But people believed it did. Messages trickled into their inbox. Is this your sister store? Are you moving? I thought you were doing a pop-up in Cambridge. Confusion is the first leak in the boat. The rest is just water. Then came the final phase. Their finances. I knew I couldn't get direct access to their bank or books, but I didn't need to. Small businesses run on razor-thin margins. If I couldn't open the safe, I could still close the doors. The town's business association held annual microgrants for marketing, renovation, and seasonal events. A $5,000 pool split among applicants. Hearth and Home had won a share last year and posted about it extensively. I applied this year using a dummy LLC with all the trappings of a brand new boutique. Website, EIN, social presence, fake business address in the same zip code. I submitted before the deadline. A week later, they posted finalists publicly. My shop made the cut. My parents didn't. They posted vague complaints about being overlooked and the need to support legacy businesses, not fads. It was petty, but their pride was cracking. That's when I went for the softest part, their accountant. I tracked her down through LinkedIn and public state records. She had a modest website and offered services to small businesses locally. I scheduled a consultation call pretending to be a boutique owner needing help filing quarterly taxes. During the call, I asked casually if she worked with anyone I knew. When she mentioned Hearth and Home, I feigned a surprised silence. "Oh," I said, "that's good to know." I'd heard they were being looked into by the IRS after someone reported their PPP loan misuse, but maybe it was just a rumor. A beat of silence. Really? She said, alarmed. I haven't heard anything. Probably nothing, I said breezily. You know how Facebook gossip works. I ended the call, thanked her, and hung up. 2 days later, Hearth and Home's Instagram bio changed. We stand by our integrity and transparency always. Guilt was making them loud, and loud people get sloppy. By now, their posts had dwindled from daily to once or twice a week. Their photo quality dipped. Captions felt unhinged. They'd started sharing things that weren't even relevant, outdated reposts, blurry photos of slow days, and memes about burnout. Their aesthetic was falling apart. So was their cash flow. The boutique began closing early for restocking more often. A few items disappeared from the shelves permanently. They stopped carrying the custom candles that once made up a third of their Instagram traffic. I watched it all from a distance, silent and still. This wasn't revenge born of screaming or fire or confrontation. This was structural collapse. I wasn't destroying their business. I was removing every bone in its spine, one vertebra at a time, until it could no longer hold its own weight. And the best part? They still didn't suspect a thing. I thought I would feel victorious when it started to happen for real. I imagined some sharp rush of satisfaction, maybe even a cruel sense of joy, when I finally saw the consequences land. That's what revenge stories promise. After all, a moment where the scales tip, where justice feels loud and unmistakable. But when my parents began to unravel publicly, what I felt instead was something far more unsettling. Peace. It arrived slowly, like a fog rolling in over water. Subtle, almost gentle. The first sign was my mother's face. She appeared in one of their Instagram stories, late one evening, standing behind the counter of the boutique. The lighting was wrong, harsh and unflattering, casting shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there before. Her smile was tight, practiced. She spoke directly into the camera about supporting local businesses during challenging times. Her voice brittle, the words rehearsed. Halfway through the video, her gaze flicked off-screen toward my father. I assumed, and for a split second, the smile slipped. I watched that moment again and again. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was distance, as if I were observing strangers whose lives no longer had any claim on mine. Their posts became erratic. One day, overly cheerful, the next defensive. They shared motivational quotes about resilience and perseverance, captions about weathering storms, and trusting the process. My father began replying to comments in ways he never had before, too long, too emotional, tinged with irritation. The mask was cracking. Then came the closures. At first, it was just Mondays. Closed for inventory and planning, the sign read. Then Tuesdays. Eventually, weekends too, once unthinkable for a boutique like theirs. Customers started asking questions online. Some were kind, others were blunt. Are you guys okay? Google says you're closed a lot now. Is the shop still open? They answered every question with vague reassurances. Just restructuring, temporary changes, exciting updates coming soon. But there were no updates. Only absence. I found myself checking their pages less frequently, not because I was afraid of what I'd see, but because I no longer needed the confirmation. The work was done, the machine was in motion. Whether I watched or not, it would keep turning. That was when the power hit me. Not in a rush, not like adrenaline, but as a quiet understanding. I had changed the trajectory of their lives without raising my voice, without exposing myself, without asking permission. I had seen the system for what it was and learned how to move within it. And once you realize you can do that, once you understand how influence really works, it's impossible to unlearn. That realization scared me more than anything else, because it would have been easy to keep going. I could have taken more, pushed harder, found new pressure points. The temptation was there, humming softly beneath the surface. It wasn't fueled by anger anymore. It was fueled by capability, by the knowledge that I could. But every time that thought crept in, another followed close behind. This is where people lose themselves. I started thinking about my grandmother again, about the trust she'd left me, about how deliberate she'd been with every decision, every boundary. She hadn't just given me money. She'd tried to give me a foundation, something stable, ethical, something meant to grow into freedom, not control. I wondered what she would think of me now. Around that time, my parents began bleeding into the real world, not just online. A former neighbor reached out to me through Facebook. We hadn't spoken in years. Her message was awkward, hesitant. "Hey, Jenna, I hope this isn't weird. I ran into your mom at the grocery store. She didn't look well. She mentioned you haven't been talking. I just wanted to check in and make sure you're okay." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Thanks for checking. I'm doing well." That was all. I didn't owe anyone explanations. Not anymore. A week later, my father emailed me, the first direct contact since our confrontation months earlier. The subject line read, "Family." I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. The email was long, rambling, defensive. He talked about misunderstandings, about how hard this year had been, about mistakes made on all sides. He never mentioned the inheritance. Not once. Instead, he framed everything as a breakdown in communication, as if words, not actions, had caused the rift. Near the end, he wrote, "We don't understand why you're punishing us." That sentence sat in my chest like a stone. Punishing. As if accountability were cruelty, as if consequences were abuse. I didn't respond. And for the first time since this all began, I didn't feel compelled to. The boutique closed temporarily the following month. The post announcing it was drenched in forced optimism, full of phrases like taking time to reflect and exciting new chapters ahead. Comments poured in, some supportive, others skeptical. One stood out. "Didn't this happen to that shop 2 doors down a few years ago? Same story, same ending." I closed the app. That night, I sat alone on my couch, lights off, city noise humming through the window. I realized something, then something I hadn't expected. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for apologies, not for closure, not for vindication. I had already moved on. The peace I felt wasn't relief. It was ownership. Of my choices, of my silence, of the line I had drawn and refused to erase. But power has a way of testing you. Once you know what you're capable of, the real challenge isn't restraint, it's deciding who you want to be when no one is watching. And as my parents' carefully curated life collapsed into quiet obscurity, I stood at a crossroads I hadn't anticipated. I could walk away now, letting the rest play out on its own. Or I could take one final step. Not out of anger, but out of truth. The end didn't arrive with fanfare. No press release. No tearful farewell video. Just a plain white sign taped crookedly to the front door of the boutique. Closed until further notice. Thank you for your support. That was it. A final, muted whimper from the place my parents had once called their legacy. I didn't drive by in person. I didn't need to. A friend sent me the photo, unprompted. I stared at it for a long time, not quite sure what I felt. I expected satisfaction. Instead, it felt like someone turning the last page of a long, heavy book. The boutique was finished. The online store vanished a week later. Their Instagram account went private. Comments were disabled. Google listed the business as permanently closed within days. All signs of life were erased like chalk off a sidewalk. And still, they didn't know it was me. But someone was getting suspicious. The email came from a former employee, Emma. I remembered her. Bright, 20-something, always smiling. She'd worked there on weekends when I still occasionally visited, back when the lies hadn't surfaced yet. She found me through LinkedIn. Hi, Jenna, I hope you're well. I know this might be strange, but I've been thinking a lot about what happened at Hearth and Home. It was always such a great place to work until it wasn't. The last few months were chaotic. I always wondered if someone pushed things along. Not out of malice, but justice. Anyway, I guess I just wanted to say thank you. If that was you. She didn't ask for confirmation. She didn't need to. And for the first time, I let myself smile, not cruelly, not bitterly, just quietly. Because maybe someone did understand. Maybe someone saw the truth. But peace has a way of shifting when the past comes knocking. I got the call a week after the boutique closed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said to pick up. It was my mother. Not a text, not an email, her voice. Flat, low, drained. Jenna. I said nothing. She took a breath. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I understand. I don't know where else to turn. Still, I said nothing. The silence pressed against us. I know you're angry, and I know we made mistakes. Her voice cracked. But everything's gone. The store, the savings. We're behind on the mortgage now. Your father's trying to get work again, but no one's hiring someone his age. I sat there, frozen. Every word should have landed like a trophy. But all I could think about was how long they'd lived off what wasn't theirs without shame, without honesty. She kept talking. I guess I'm calling to ask if there's anything you can do, just to help us get back on our feet. We'll pay you back, I swear. And that's when it hit me. She still didn't understand. She thought this was about money, about resources, about fixing something that was already broken beyond repair. She thought I was still the daughter they could lean on, manipulate, coax with just the right mix of guilt and desperation. But I wasn't her daughter anymore. Not in the way she wanted. I can't help you, I said calmly. Silence. Jenna, please. I'm not asking for much. Just enough to hold us over until... No, I interrupted. You're asking for more than money. You're asking me to pretend none of this happened. To pretend you didn't take what wasn't yours. To pretend you didn't lie. Her voice wavered. We didn't lie. We just made different choices. I let out a soft, breathless laugh. You forged documents to access a trust meant for me. You emptied it. You told me it didn't exist. That's not a choice. That's theft. We thought we were doing what was best for the family. I paused. There it was again, that old script. That justification that made them feel noble while gutting me from the inside out. I'm the family, I said. Or I was. The line went quiet. And then she said something I didn't expect. Was it you? My heart slowed. What? The store. The vendors. The grant. Everything falling apart. Was it you? I said nothing. Not yes, not no. She let out a long breath. It was, wasn't it? Still, I didn't answer. She wasn't entitled to the truth. Not anymore. If it was, her voice softened, almost reverent, You were always the smart one. We knew that. We just didn't think you'd turn it on us." And with that, she hung up. I stared at the screen, the words echoing like ghosts. You were always the smart one. That was the closest thing to an admission I'd ever get. The end didn't arrive with fanfare. No press release. No tearful farewell video. Just a plain white sign taped crookedly to the front door of the boutique. Closed until further notice. Thank you for your support. That was it. A final, muted whimper from the place my parents had once called their legacy. I didn't drive by in person. I didn't need to. A friend sent me the photo, unprompted. I stared at it for a long time, not quite sure what I felt. I expected satisfaction. Instead, it felt like someone turning the last page of a long, heavy book. The boutique was finished. The online store vanished a week later. Their Instagram account went private. Comments were disabled. Google listed the business as permanently closed within days. All signs of life were erased like chalk off a sidewalk. And still, they didn't know it was me. But someone was getting suspicious. The email came from a former employee, Emma. I remembered her. Bright, 20-something, always smiling. She'd worked there on weekends when I still occasionally visited, back when the lies hadn't surfaced yet. She found me through LinkedIn. Hi, Jenna, I hope you're well. I know this might be strange, but I've been thinking a lot about what happened at Hearth and Home. It was always such a great place to work until it wasn't. The last few months were chaotic. I always wondered if someone pushed things along. Not out of malice, but justice. Anyway, I guess I just wanted to say thank you. If that was you. She didn't ask for confirmation. She didn't need to. And for the first time, I let myself smile, not cruelly, not bitterly, just quietly. Because maybe someone did understand. Maybe someone saw the truth. But peace has a way of shifting when the past comes knocking. I got the call a week after the boutique closed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said to pick up. It was my mother. Not a text, not an email, her voice. Flat, low, drained. Jenna. I said nothing. She took a breath. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I understand. I don't know where else to turn. Still, I said nothing. The silence pressed against us. I know you're angry, and I know we made mistakes. Her voice cracked. But everything's gone. The store, the savings. We're behind on the mortgage now. Your father's trying to get work again, but no one's hiring someone his age. I sat there, frozen. Every word should have landed like a trophy. But all I could think about was how long they'd lived off what wasn't theirs without shame, without honesty. She kept talking. I guess I'm calling to ask if there's anything you can do, just to help us get back on our feet. We'll pay you back, I swear. And that's when it hit me. She still didn't understand. She thought this was about money, about resources, about fixing something that was already broken beyond repair. She thought I was still the daughter they could lean on, manipulate, coax with just the right mix of guilt and desperation. But I wasn't her daughter anymore. Not in the way she wanted. I can't help you, I said calmly. Silence. Jenna, please. I'm not asking for much. Just enough to hold us over until. No, I interrupted. You're asking for more than money. You're asking me to pretend none of this happened. To pretend you didn't take what wasn't yours. To pretend you didn't lie. Her voice wavered. We didn't lie. We just made different choices. I let out a soft, breathless laugh. You forged documents to access a trust meant for me. You emptied it. You told me it didn't exist. That's not a choice. That's theft. We thought we were doing what was best for the family. I paused. There it was again, that old script. That justification that made them feel noble while gutting me from the inside out. I'm the family, I said. Or I was. The line went quiet. And then she said something I didn't expect. Was it you? My heart slowed. What? The store, the vendors, the grant, everything falling apart. Was it you? I said nothing. Not yes, not no. She let out a long breath. It was, wasn't it? Still, I didn't answer. She wasn't entitled to the truth. Not anymore. If it was, her voice softened, almost reverent, you were always the smart one. We knew that. We just didn't think you'd turn it on us. And with that, she hung up. I stared at the screen, the words echoing like ghosts. You were always the smart one. That was the closest thing to an admission I'd ever get. There's a strange quiet that follows a long war. Not silence, just stillness. The kind that settles deep in your bones once you realize you've finally stopped bracing for impact. In the weeks after the boutique shuttered and my mother's voice disappeared from my phone, that quiet filled the space where anger used to live. I expected it to feel like victory. It didn't. It felt like breath returning to my lungs after years of holding it. I wasn't relieved. I wasn't triumphant. I was untethered. The life I'd built around resistance was no longer needed. The revenge was done, the plan complete. And without it, without that focus driving my every move, I found myself standing in the ruins of two lives, theirs and mine. That's when I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. Grief. Grief for what I lost. Grief for the version of me that believed in them. For the young woman who worked weekends in that boutique, smiling at customers, thinking she was helping a family business that would someday be hers. For the girl who believed her parents were flawed but well-meaning, that their silence around money was discomfort, not deception. Grief for the time I spent trying to be good enough for people who were never going to choose me unless I served a purpose. Now, with no one left to serve, no facade left to maintain, I was left with only myself. And that was the real beginning. I started small. A new apartment, nothing fancy, just space that was mine, walls that held no memory of them. I painted it soft sage and warm linen. I bought secondhand furniture with character and history. I made tea every morning and walked barefoot across the wooden floor like a woman learning how to exist again. Then I found work, real work. Not for survival, not to prove anything, just something I chose because I wanted to. I applied for a grant writing position at a local nonprofit that focused on women's education. The interview went well, not because I performed, but because I didn't need the job to define me. I told the truth. I let myself be a person instead of a product. I got the offer 2 days later. The first paycheck felt better than all the money I'd ever sent to lawyers or funneled through legal loopholes during my quiet dismantling. Because it was clean, mine, honest. It was around this time that Marcus re-entered my life. He was an old friend from college, someone I hadn't seen since graduation. He reached out on a whim, asking if I'd like to grab coffee sometime. I almost said no. I wasn't ready to let anyone in, but something about his message, casual, unpressured, felt like fresh air. We met at a little cafe on the corner of Elm and Baker. It smelled like cinnamon and cardamom. He wore the same half-crooked smile he'd had 10 years ago. We talked for 3 hours. He didn't ask about my family, not once. He just listened, laughed, told stories. Made me feel like someone who wasn't defined by the worst thing that ever happened to her. It felt like a life raft, not because I needed saving, but because I finally realized I didn't. A month passed, then another. And then, the confrontation I didn't see coming. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was walking home from the co-op grocery store, reusable tote slung over my shoulder, when I saw her. My mother, standing across the street, half hidden beneath the awning of a bookstore, sunglasses on, arms crossed over her chest like she'd been waiting. Watching. I stopped mid-step. She took it as an invitation. She crossed the street, slowly, her heels clicking against the pavement. I stayed frozen. My tote felt suddenly too heavy. "Jenna," she said. Her voice was quiet, not cold, not warm, just tired. I looked at her. Really looked at her. Her hair was shorter now, less styled. She wore a plain beige sweater and jeans, no designer purse. No manicure. She looked like someone trying to disappear. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I needed to see you." "You could have called." You don't answer. There was a pause between us, stretching like wire. Thin, sharp. "I'm not here to beg," she said finally. "I know you won't help us." I didn't speak. I wasn't sure I trusted my voice. She sighed and reached into her purse-worn leather, not the kind she used to carry. She pulled out a small envelope. "I found this," she said, holding it out. "It's yours." I took it cautiously. Inside was a photograph, old, curled at the edges. Me, age 10, sitting on my grandmother's lap. We were on the porch swing at her lake house. I was laughing at something. She was looking at me like I was her whole world. The memory hit like a punch. "I kept it," my mother said softly. "All these years. I didn't forget what she meant to you." I looked up, confused, angry, sad, all of it colliding. "Then why did you do it?" I asked, voice low. "Why take what she left for me? Why lie?" She didn't flinch. "We were drowning," she said. "Your father made some bad investments. We were losing the house. We told ourselves it was temporary, that we'd pay it back, that you wouldn't notice. And when the money was gone, we didn't know how to admit it." I closed my eyes. Excuses, rationalizations, every word a shovel digging their own grave. She stepped closer. "But that's not why I came." "Then why?" She hesitated. "Because I know it was you." My heart stilled. "I don't have proof," she added. "But I don't need it. I know what you're capable of. You always watched, always listened, always knew more than you let on. And if anyone could have unraveled everything without leaving fingerprints, it would be you." I looked at her, and I saw, for the first time, the truth in her eyes. Not resentment, not accusation, respect. Not because I hurt them, but because I had done what she never could, taken control. "So what now?" I asked. "Do you want an apology? A confession?" "No," she said. "I want you to know. I don't blame you." That knocked the air from my chest. "I blame myself," she continued, "for raising a daughter who had to protect herself from her own parents. That's what I live with now." She took a step back. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to see your face, to know you're okay, that you're building something better." I said nothing. She gave a small nod and turned to walk away. I watched her disappear into the crowd, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a fracture in the wall I'd built around my heart. Not because I forgave her, but because she finally saw me. And maybe that was the closest thing to closure I'd ever get. The days after that final encounter with my mother were quieter than I expected. No letters, no emails, no new voicemails begging or accusing. Just silence. Not emptiness, just space. The kind of space that lets things breathe. I don't know what I expected after she said those words. I blame myself. Maybe a flood of emotions, maybe rage flaring back up. But what I actually felt was release. She'd finally named it. Not the theft, not the inheritance, not the business unraveling. She named what mattered most. That she failed me as a parent. And somehow, hearing her say it didn't reopen the wound, it closed it, not because it fixed anything, but because I finally understood the wound was never mine to carry in the first place. It belonged to them. Their choices, their silence, their betrayal. I was just the one who had survived it. Now I had to decide what came next. Not just for them, but for me. For the first time, I started to think about the word legacy differently. It wasn't about money. Not really. It wasn't about what was passed down. It was about what was chosen, what we build intentionally, what we create and protect, not out of guilt, but out of care. That thought stayed with me as I leaned into my work at the nonprofit. My role started small, just grant proposals and correspondence. But soon I was asked to sit in on strategy meetings, then budget planning, then long-term vision discussions. It turned out I was good at building things when I wasn't building to hurt, but to heal. It started to feel like purpose, and not the kind I'd clung to in pursuit of approval. This was quieter, cleaner, mine. I began mentoring a few younger women in the organization, first casually, then more formally. One of them, a sharp 22-year-old named Mia, reminded me of myself at that age. Too eager to please. Too quick to apologize. I watched her grow stronger, more assertive, and every time she took up space in a meeting, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. Pride. The healthy kind. Not the performative kind. The kind that said, "Look what we can become when we stop asking for permission." I also reconnected with Marcus. We took things slow. Dinners, hikes, lazy Saturday mornings with coffee and silence that didn't need filling. One night, as we lay tangled in sheets and soft lamplight, he asked me something no one ever had. What would you have done with that inheritance if they hadn't taken it? The question took me by surprise. I rolled onto my side, staring at the ceiling, fingers tracing the edge of the blanket. I used to think I'd use it to buy something big, a house, maybe start a business, prove I was responsible enough to deserve it. Like I had to justify having it. And now? I smiled, a small, sad thing. Now I think I would have just rested. He didn't press. Because he understood the weight of that word. I had lived a life shaped by earning, by striving, by being worthy of people who had already decided I wasn't enough unless I was useful. What I wanted now wasn't applause. It was stillness, space, a foundation that didn't crack under expectations. I didn't need revenge anymore. I needed peace. But peace, it turned out, had an active cost. You had to choose it every day, not just once, over and over. So I made decisions. I set up a financial account, not secret, not hidden, just secure. And I started contributing to it monthly, not because I needed a safety net, but because someday someone in my life might, and I wanted to be the kind of person who gave without taking. I also started writing again. Nothing grand, nothing for publication, just essays, thoughts, letters to a younger version of myself. Some days I wrote angry words. Some days hopeful ones. But every sentence was a step away from the story I'd been handed and toward the one I wanted to write. One night, I sat at my kitchen table, soft jazz humming in the background, tea cooling beside my laptop, and I wrote the line that would stay with me forever. They took what they needed and left nothing behind. I learned to grow in that empty space, and now, that space is mine. I printed it, framed it, hung it above my desk. Not as a trophy, but as a compass. Months passed. The seasons shifted. My hair grew longer, my apartment filled with books and candles, and the laughter of friends who had become family. Occasionally, someone would mention my parents. A cousin's update, a vague family thread I'd long since muted. I learned they'd moved into a small rental on the edge of town, that my father worked part-time stocking shelves, that my mother taught piano lessons in the afternoons. They were surviving, and somehow I was okay with that. I didn't wish them harm anymore, but I didn't wish them back into my life either. Forgiveness, I had learned, didn't require reconciliation. It didn't mean pretending nothing had happened. It meant choosing not to carry it forward. It meant not letting the wound dictate the way you walked. And I was walking just fine. Better than fine. I was free. One evening, I hosted a dinner party, something I never used to do. My space had always felt too small. I had always felt too small. But this time, I filled the room with people I loved. Friends, colleagues, Marcus, Mia, even a neighbor I barely knew who brought the most incredible homemade bread and laughed like joy was easy. After everyone left and the dishes were done, I stood in the quiet of my living room, fairy lights glowing, wine glass in hand, and I whispered something into the air. I'm proud of you. To myself. To the girl I was. To the woman I'd become. That was my legacy. Not revenge. Not what was taken. But what I built after. And no one could steal that. Sometimes, when the sun hits my living room window just right, I catch sight of my reflection in the glass softened by light, blurred by motion, and I almost don't recognize her. Not because she's changed so much, but because, for the first time, she's whole. It's been nearly a year since the boutique closed, since the accounts froze, since my mother found me and left me with the photograph and the words I never thought I'd hear, since I chose to let it be over. And every day since then, I've been learning how to live in the aftermath not just of betrayal, but of transformation. Because that's what this really was. Not revenge, not destruction. Becoming. I don't think people talk enough about what it costs to burn down the lies we were raised inside of. How exhausting it is to realize the people who were supposed to protect you never did. That everything you thought was a safety net was actually a leash. There's grief in that awakening, rage too, and shame, even though none of it was your fault. But if you're lucky or determined, you come out the other side with something more than scars. You come out with truth. And truth, I've learned, is the seed of everything that matters. The truth about my parents? They took what wasn't theirs because they thought they were entitled to it. They justified it, hid it, benefited from it. And they never would have stopped unless someone made them. That someone was me. But the truth about me? I stopped needing them to admit what they did. I stopped needing anyone to tell me I was right or that I was wrong. I stopped asking for permission to heal. I just did it. And in that space, I built something better. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't dramatic, but it was mine. A career I chose, a community I nurtured, a love I didn't expect, a home that felt like exhale. Peace didn't arrive like a lightning bolt. It unfolded slowly, a steady, quiet thing that grew in the absence of chaos. Some nights I sit at my desk, journal open, candles flickering, and I reread the letter I wrote to myself 6 months ago. Dear Jenna, they don't define you. Not the lies, not the loss, not the ones who took from you and called it love. You are more than what they stole. You are what you chose to build after. And now, if you're still with me, if you followed this story from the beginning, maybe you're wondering why I'm telling it, why I'm sharing the ugliest, hardest thing I've ever done, and the most liberating. It's not to be admired. It's not to be judged. It's to tell you something I wish someone had told me back when I was 25, sitting on the floor of my uncle's attic holding a will with my name on it and realizing I had been erased from my own future. It's this. You are allowed to be angry. You are allowed to set things on fire figuratively or emotionally when someone burns your house down first. You are allowed to stop being the good daughter, the peacekeeper, the one who always understands. You are allowed to say, "This ends with me." But when it does end, when the revenge has run its course and the silence settles in, you are also allowed to choose peace. To walk forward instead of circling back. To put down the weight that was never yours and ask, what do I want to create now? Because revenge, as satisfying as it can be in the moment, is not the same as resolution. Resolution comes from within. It's the choice to let the truth be enough. To let yourself be enough. Not because they changed, but because you did. I don't know what kind of family you come from. Maybe they were kind but flawed. Maybe they were cruel in ways that left no bruises but all the damage. Maybe they were a little of both. But if you've ever felt like you had to earn love that should have been freely given, if you've ever been called ungrateful for naming your pain, if you've ever quietly kept the receipts of your generosity, hoping one day someone might see it and finally say thank you, then this story is for you. You're not crazy. You're not selfish. You're not broken. You were just handed a story that wasn't yours. And you, beautiful, brilliant, battered but unbowed, you have the power to write a new one. So do it. Even if your hands shake. Even if no one claps. Even if it starts with just a whisper. I'm allowed to take up space. I'm allowed to want more. I'm allowed to choose myself. And if someday the people who hurt you come back around, wanting reconciliation without repair, you get to say no, or yes, or not yet. You get to decide what healing looks like on your terms, because healing isn't about making them comfortable. It's about making you whole. And you deserve that. You always have. Even if they never told you. Even if they tried to take it away. Even if they still think they did nothing wrong. Your story doesn't end with what they did. It begins with what you do next. So take the pen, take the space, take the life, and write something breathtaking. I did, and it saved me.